Hey everyone, this is Ryan Niemiller, the cripple thread of comedy from America's Got Talent. Do me a big favor, like, comment, and subscribe on my good buddy D on DNC Digital. Have fun, everybody.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy D from DNC Digital, back with another episode of DNC Radio. Today's guest is Ryan Niemiller. Ryan Niemiller was on America's Got Talent in season 14. Then he returned for Champions Part 2. And he became a semifinalist. He's a very funny guy, very talented comedian. So we're going to be talking to him, especially around the pandemic. I want to see what kind of things have been done. I know he was talking about going back to shows. So, Ryan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for doing the show, man.
Appreciate it, D. Thanks for having me. How are we doing today?
We're doing good, man. It's really cool because in real time I saw your audition and I thought it was hilarious, man. So congratulations on your success so far.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been a really weird couple years, pandemic notwithstanding. Just that run on AGT was just bonkers because I had 12 years of comedy before I got that opportunity. So I went from no one knowing or caring who I was to suddenly millions of people see you, and now people want to see me do comedy on purpose. It's really a nice change of pace.
So, so I want to talk about that. I'm going to, I have notes here, but that's an interesting point. You were doing comedy for 12 years before you went on AGT. So like people 2-3 years in the game are already like, man, I should be up there. I should probably try this. Why did it take 12 years? Was it a confidence thing, or how did you come to that decision?
Part of it was it took 12 years, partly because it took me 5 years to get on the show. So I tried for 5 years. It's not like last year was, or like, for that season was the only time I thought of it. So I tried for 5 years.
Yeah.
And another part of it too was just, it wasn't a lack of confidence, because like I'm not always the most confident human being in my day-to-day life. But with like comedy, I was like, I'm going to make it. Something eventually is going to happen and blow up. But for me, I wanted to make sure I was so over prepared, because one of the worst things I feel you can do in a business like this, and it's hard to have the discipline to do it, but like if you get this opportunity to audition for something major, or like if they would have said yes to me 5 years ago to actually go in front of the judges, I would have blown it, because I wasn't ready, both as a comic. I wasn't, 5 years is a long time in comedy years, as far as like having the skill set to be a headliner.
Shows during the week. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's much different. And then just like as a person, because like I loved the experience with AGT, but I was ready for it. 5 years ago, my life was in such disarray, like just personally, that like the pressure of all that would have gotten the better of me. So that's kind of part of it too. It's not just getting on the TV show and doing well, because you have to be in the right mindset for it, because it's a lot of scrutiny. Like I said, when you go from no one really knowing who you are to now you're getting hate mail because you beat somebody's favorite contestant, like it can wear on you, because I'm still just a dude, I'm just a guy who grew up in a trailer in Indiana, and now suddenly I have this platform, and you get a lot of love, but you also get those douchebags every now and then, and it still hits you, as a person.
You went to Indiana State University, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. Fighting trees. Go Sycamores.
What did you major in?
I majored in the very lucrative and surefire degree that is theater. It is, getting a theater degree, you're just, you're so employable. You're just right out there right away. So it's one of those degrees that I had fun. I met some of my best friends for life. It did teach me a lot of skills that were useful for stand-up comedy, but as a degree, it's a little weird. It's odd to get a degree in a field where somebody can just come off the street and take work from you. You don't have to be a trained actor to get an acting job. I can't decide I want to be a surgeon and just go to the job interview to be a surgeon.
Just
and they let me
walk
do
in
it.
And just ask for all the knives and everything to open everybody up.
Just because I had a really good interview, they don't let me cut anyone's body up. So it's a weird field.
So for those that maybe haven't seen your audition or don't know of you, the most I guess I would say with all due respect, the most recognizable thing about you is you have a disability in your arms.
Correct.
And yeah. So I'd like to know, because I was bullied in middle school, and then when I got to high school, I learned to laugh at myself and just make the joke before the bully did, so that it could kind of take the power away from them. So what kind of challenges did you face growing up around, really terrible 13-year-olds?
Honestly, and I know it's not like my story might not be the same as everybody's. I was pretty lucky because the skill you talked about developing in high school, I learned it before elementary school. It's just something that kind of came naturally to me for whatever reason. I just learned like, hey, if I, pardon the pun, but if I can disarm you by making the joke first, then because nobody really wants to beat up the funny guy, the guy who's laughing. And I was never.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I never made fun of anyone. Like I never made jokes at someone else's expense unless I was also putting myself expense too. It was like, so when you do that, no one really going to give you too much guff for it. I actually had a lot more trouble dealing with the disability when I became an adult, because you have a little bit of a shield as a kid. As long as you figure out a way to not get yourself bullied, the real world's not really hitting you in the same way when you're 12 as when you're, 25. So I had a lot more trouble with stuff like dating and being able to get day work. I would apply for jobs and people would just, they never outwardly said it because it's illegal to do so.
Right.
But they kind of look at you and they're like, well, this guy has a disability, so there's no way he can be a cashier or whatever inane job it was. So that's actually where it affected me a lot more, because I was always kind of under this impression like, yeah, I'm different. I have some different challenges, but I know what I can do. I know what ability I have. So I'll just go in. I can do this job. It'll be fine. And then having that pushback for the first time in my life, that's what really hit me a lot more.
A lot of your comedy is really talking about your disability and your challenges and, funny stories. And it makes people comfortable, to not offend you or not make you feel bad about these things that you're, pretty much proud of. But you always said, that your comedy is pretty much built on that. Now, had you not had that disability, what would your material be like? I mean, there are people that feel that, if you got a chubby guy up there and he does a bunch of fat jokes, and it's like, okay, he's kind of using his weight as a crutch. Is there something to be said about people who use things that maybe, like a disability, to use that as comedy and not other things?
So it's my answer to that kind of comes twofold. So, do I talk about my disability? Yes. Is that all I talk about? No. So a lot of the kind of blowback I got from AGTs, because like during that platform with the story I was trying to tell, yeah, I'm making jokes about the disability because it's what set me apart from everybody else. But you also got to remember, on that show, you're up there for 2 minutes at a time. I can't talk about, I can't ignore it. If I would, because like everyone says like, oh, we use it as a crutch. Yeah, but if I went up there and never mentioned it, people would also be like, well, why doesn't he mention the one thing that everybody notices? Everyone's a critic, and they don't they're idiots when it comes to that. Like, they just are. So like my live show now, I do an hour, maybe 5 minutes of it is my disability.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I guess I'm in that audience that only really did see your acts on AGT. So then, I would always want more, because you're funny. One, because you're hilarious.
Yeah.
But also because I'm like, I want to talk about something else, because a lot of people do go up there, and that's the only thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing I'm saying. Like as far as like that context, that show's not designed to like really showcase the full gamut of what anyone does. You get 2-minute spurts, you can do a little bit of variety, but it's not like, if you go way all over the place, then it's so disjointed and like nobody can follow it that way. But the other like thing that I always say, because, if people want to be like, if they don't think jokes about my disability are funny, that's one thing. I'm not going to ever force anyone to have to think I'm funny. That's not how comedy works. There's going to be people that like you, people that don't. But when people will outwardly like tell you like, oh, I don't want you to talk about my disability. For me, it's like, oh, you don't want me to talk about my life then. You don't want me to talk about the actual things I've experienced. You know, I don't know we don't know each other very well. We've just kind of met talking through Twitter.
Right.
You know, that would be like me telling you, like, never talk about being Hispanic because I don't care about that. You know, like maybe that's not like the only thing you want to talk about, but it flavors who you are as a person. You can't just take that away from you because it's who you are. And mine just happens to be something that makes people more uncomfortable. You know, because like if a comic up there is a woman talking about being a woman, or they're a mother, or someone's, you know, a husband or a father or whatever, you don't tell them like, well, don't talk about your life experience. But for me, since I talk about a disability and sometimes it makes you uncomfortable, well, he just talks about the same thing. I want to, like, no one else has to put up with that shit other than people with disabilities. It's so frustrating. Because at the end of the day, if people are laughing, shut up.
Nice.
If I was up there telling those jokes and nobody ever laughed, then yeah, maybe I should change my approach. But I got standing ovations, and now I can buy a house telling jokes because of those disability jokes. So yeah, I'm wrong though. I'm not telling the right jokes. I hate that with like, because like people mistake sometimes their personal preference for what someone should do.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Because I personally, and this is not me trying to talk smack or cause a thing, but hopefully this point will make sense. I find Larry the Cable Guy's act to be horrible to watch. It does not speak to me in any way. I don't think the jokes are funny. However, that guy's making $500,000 a night and travels the country. So who am I, who's right now living in a 900 square foot apartment? Who am I to tell him he's doing it wrong? Everyone has different tastes. Everyone has things they like. So like what you like, don't like what you don't like, but quit trying to tell artists what they should and shouldn't do. If it's not for you, move on. There's thousands of other comics that you're going to like.
Definitely. And that brings me to my next point. I feel like even though we have evolved as human beings, whether or not that's true or not, I feel like, you know, things are being more accepted. But at the same time, a movie like Blazing Saddles would not get through the writer's room because of the content that it had. Mm-hmm. So what is it that we have kind of devolved in comedy? Sometimes you go up there and you tell a joke and you get in trouble. So why is that now?
I think it's just the way that society changes. I'm kind of in the minority here, and I would, again, it comes from the same point of I would never tell somebody not to write a joke or not to tell a certain joke, no matter what the topic is. Because I do fully believe that every topic, like nothing's off limits.
Is everybody fair game then?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. However, you also don't get to police what people are offended by. Because they don't know. You don't know their full story. You don't know why it affected them that way. Mm-hmm. You know. So basically, I always think the contract is, because I've gotten a little bit of flack recently because I make some very light political jokes on Twitter. Nothing crazy. But people get really fired up about it. And the contract with like comedian to audience is I tell a joke, you laugh or you don't. Mm-hmm. That's it. I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong for not laughing. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for being offended. I will tell you you're wrong for trying to tell me what I should do. That's it. Like, that's the difference. So, like, if people want to be offended, if you know, I'll use a topic like, you know, you can't really joke about rape the same way you used to. Because it's a serious thing for people.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, okay.
So it's a situation that, like, do I think that topic is now completely taboo? No, I don't. However, you don't get to tell society they're wrong for now not accepting it. That's how human beings evolved. If we didn't, you know, black people would still be using different drinking fountains and women couldn't vote. You know, things change.
Yeah, okay.
You know, so it's like, so you as the comedian, if you want to take that risk and make this joke, you'll probably find an audience for it. However, you know, you have to also go in with that contract knowing, hey, if people don't like this, they're also right. No one's obligated to think you're funny because you had this witty take on something.
Right. I remember Key and Peele had a skit, and it was like a war veteran who had every disability imaginable, like he was a paraplegic and a burn victim, and they got in trouble. But then actual veterans stood up and they're like, "Hey, I'm tired of being, of people being uncomfortable around me. It's okay for them to joke about it."
Yeah.
So now that you have people kind of defending the comedians, it also adds another layer. Like, oh, well, should I be offended or should I not? Because the guy that they're joking about is not offended.
Yeah, I mean, and there definitely is part of it too, but kind of like what I was trying to say, I never think it's anyone's job to tell other people what they can and can't be offended by, because we all have different life experiences, like again, I'll put it into this, and I don't want to make this like strictly a race thing, because again, I don't know you very well, but if someone
it's okay.
Yeah.
I have a dark sense of humor. I'm all for it. I'm all good. It's all
well. I'll just put it like this, like if someone uses a traditionally Hispanic racial slur to me, it's probably not going to hit me nearly as hard as if they used it to you.
Right.
Those it's different context. It's a different world completely. So just because I might not be personally offended doesn't mean I get to be mad at you if you are. Because you have a different life experience, it has more weight to you than it does to me. So that's why when someone gets mad, if people get mad about jokes, it might have more weight to them. That's just part of the excuse. But like, you also have to understand, like as a performer, also like I am not completely. If I get more laughs than I do people offended, the joke I think to me is fine. If everyone's pissed off, I'm not doing my job right. You know what I'm saying? Like, your joke has to be at least 51% funny.
No, yeah, I understand.
Because otherwise, at the end of the day, this is a business. You want people to laugh and want to come back. If you're just telling shit and you piss off everybody, then what are you doing then? You're a douchebag then. That's all you are, So like you have to be able to take that risk and understand, okay, maybe I'm not offended by this, but if a lot of people are, how can I retool this? What can I do different? I might just have to get rid of it because that's what the market has decided about this joke.
I always watched comedy as a kid and now as an adult because it does. I feel like the first thing it does is provide an escape for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially this year. This year is such a fucked up year, and so now around the election time, you search things on Twitter, you go to Saturday Night Live, you find things that are making fun of the election and making fun of maybe some things that are ridiculous about it. So I had this conversation with somebody who works at a local news station before Donald Trump got elected, that if I am a late night comedian or a comedian who maybe specializes in some political stuff, I want, there's a part of me that wants the guy who's going to make good TV for the next 4 years. I'm going to have material for 4 years because this guy's an idiot, or I can easily make fun of that. Do you think that comedy and entertainment and, good material, good TV is what they call it, might affect a vote in somebody?
No, I mean, at least it should. There's obviously always people who want to just see the world burn, no matter what it is. Mm-hmm. There's going to be, and again, nothing against him personally, but there's going to be people that are voting for Kanye just because they think it's hilarious. Not because they actually want him to be president, but because they just think it's going to be silly. For me personally, and I think a lot of comedians that I know that I'm close with kind of think similarly, it's like, well, I'll put it this way, like, if Trump beats Biden, is there probably more material? Yes.
Right.
But I'm not going to vote for Trump exclusively because it might be easier to write jokes. Like, if you're a political comedian, you're going to figure out a way. You should be a good enough writer where no matter who wins, you can write jokes. Like, to like now say like, oh, I think this candidate is garbage, but he'll make my job easier, so I'm gonna push for him to. Like, you're a sociopath if you do that. Like it's just like anything, Like if do I want certain things to happen? No. Do I want to be discriminated against because of my disability? No. But if it's happening, I'm gonna make the best of a bad situation, and I'm gonna write the jokes about it. That's more how it is.
Fair to say. So looking you up. I know you like to watch a lot of comedy with your father, who worked in the steel mills. So I'm assuming he's a tough guy. Was it tough to make him laugh as a child?
Not really. Like it was tough to make him laugh for different reasons. So like my dad wasn't like the traditional badass kind of like, just like sort of guy. More of the issue with my dad is he was a pretty heavy drinker. Like he was an alcoholic. So it was harder to make him laugh just because he was sometimes volatile to be around.
Okay.
So it wasn't so much that he was a hard ass. It was just like he was just always so blitzed out of his mind that you just didn't know what dad it was going to be. Sometimes he was a silly, goofy drunk, and you could have fun with that. You could do silly things. Sometimes he was just verbally abusive for the sake of being verbally abusive, and you're not really, showcasing or testing new material on that guy.
Yeah.
So, but like, yeah, I mean, just like anything, like people are complex. My dad had the stuff that he thought was funny, and I kind of mentioned this on AGT a little bit, but like, stand up was one of the things that we kind of got to do together sometimes. So
yeah, I read that you guys would like to watch. So what was it about Gallagher and Dana Carvey that made you gravitate toward him?
Man, I have no idea why my dad liked them so much. Like, because my dad was a smart guy, but he was kind of a simple guy on stuff.
Okay.
Man, Sledge-O-Matic is just fun. It's pointless and stupid and has no purpose whatsoever other than it's just fun. And then my dad always liked impressions and things like that too. So he there was that one Dana Carvey special that I think was the only thing Comedy Central aired for about 6 years. It was on at all times of the day at that time. It was insane how much that was on. So I think that one was more just out of you get shown something enough, you're gonna get Stockholm syndrome, and it's gonna wear you down.
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna like it.
I read a book called Comedy on the Edge, I believe it was, and it talked about a lot about the club comedy, or the comedy club, excuse me, in the 80s and stuff. So I learned about a lot of maybe lesser known comedians, maybe not as commercially successful. Besides them, who was it that maybe you looked to in your childhood as far as comedy goes?
So the ones that really had the biggest influence on me, both when I started comedy and just who I really enjoyed before I officially knew this is what I was going to do for a job. So Dave Chappelle is obviously a huge one for me. Mm-hmm. Because like for me, the way that I always look at Dave Chappelle is he is kind of the final word on most topics.
Okay.
When it comes to like all the topics that eventually become hacky because every comedian is trying to do a joke about it. We're going to see it now with like quarantine and COVID and all this. But like once Chappelle sits down and makes his definitive take on
that's everybody's take.
It's done. Yeah, it's done. And I think that that just shows like how brilliant he is and just like how good he is at his job, that like once he does it, because even some of the stuff from his old specials, like, Killing Him Softly, like his really big specials, he's talking about like Michael Jackson. He's talking about stuff that everyone was talking about at the time. But like, that's the take. That's when it's done because Chappelle hit it.
What about the Jim Gaffigan comparisons?
See, Gaffigan, I think is brilliant because, like, his recent Twitter ranting aside, he's very clean. So he's very accessible to the normal consumer who watches. And for me, there's a couple reasons I really gravitated towards him. He's from the same area that I'm from, so I grew up in a pretty rural area of Indiana, and he's from that same general area. So just kind of from that standpoint, I was kind of in my brain like, well, if he can make it from here, I don't have an excuse. I can't blame not growing up in New York or LA for not being able to make it. That's not an excuse at this point. And for him, I also, I love how we could take just very, very simple topics and run them into the ground almost.
Like for 20 minutes.
But you don't care. You don't care.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, you could be sitting there and you're like 45 minutes into a special and you're like, Jesus, still bacon. That's what he's talking about. But you don't care. Like that's a testament to what he does, because for a lot of comedians, you'd be like, okay, all right, what's next? Okay, like, you need to spread that out. But for him, you're just like, you're so into it. He's so thorough and has so many different angles on it that you don't care that it's one thing.
So you got into comedy. You started doing your open mics. Can you tell me about the Ice House Club?
I loved the Ice House. It's been a long time since I've got to work there, just because of where life took me back to the Midwest. But that's the club I started. I took a class there because I didn't know how else to start in 2006 when I had moved out to California. And it was taught by, we're still friends to this day. Her name is Bobby Oliver. She's a very funny comic. She's been doing it for 30 plus years. Like she's legit and a sweet lady. And I kind of just fell in love with the club. It was just like, to have such like a good club be the first place I really kind of got to start going on stage consistently was cool. Cause like for a while, I don't know definitively how true this is. It's kind of one of those like things that just gets spread around the comedy business. But I had heard for a long time that comedy clubs and like bookers wouldn't accept a tape if it came from the Ice House, because that room was so good that anyone could do good there. Because like the room was just so fire.
Always. Yeah, okay, I get it.
That it wasn't necessarily a good indication of how actually talented you were, because those crowds were just so damn into everything that.
How did that make you feel about when you went up there?
I mean, it was a nice. Eventually, you kind of can't use that as like your safety net anymore. Yeah, you have to get out there and do that, but. Especially when you're first starting, it's kind of nice to have like I don't fully agree. Like you shouldn't only surround yourself with friends and family when you're doing shows, you know, because that's going to give you a distorted view. But sometimes it is nice to have a little bit of a, like, okay, this is, you know, to use a tired phrase, it's a safe space. You know, people aren't here just to destroy your dreams. Like, you know, they're going to be very supportive. And still, you know, it's not like you get a standing ovation every set. That's not how it works. You still have things you can work on, but it was a positive vibe because when I was first starting, I tried to perform everywhere because for me it was just and when you're, especially when you're starting, because you're going to be bad for a while, that's just the nature of it. But you can't help but get better if you're getting reps. It's impossible to regress as long as you're getting up there. So I was doing whatever shows I could do, and I was going to pretty volatile areas. You know, I was doing open mics in the middle of Compton. You know,
wow, okay,
I mean, I was going out to the Inland Empire, which has a lot of, like, you know, for lack of a better phrase, just like some pretty hardcore cholo bars. Like, you know, people that would laugh, like if you make them laugh, they're gonna laugh. Like, you know, funny's funny, but if they don't like you or you piss them off, it could get scary. You know, I watched my friends get their front teeth knocked out because they were messing with the wrong audience member.
Jeez.
You know, so like...
So if you make them laugh, you got the hood pass. Like, you can go into the hood, and then they're like, oh, no, he's fine. He's good.
Exactly. And it was important for me because, like, I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I'm this, like, hard ass. Because, like, I'm from a small town in Indiana that was, like, 99.9% white. All right? At that point in my life, it's not... I wasn't completely oblivious to, like, you know, other cultures and stuff, but, like... most of my life had been surrounded by people who look like me, you know? So I'm not going to say that I would, like, it's hard not to be a little nervous if you're going into something that's the unknown, but I wanted to battle test myself because the way I looked at it, I was like, okay, if I can do shows in cholo bars and go to Compton, for people who don't owe me a thing, you know, if I can survive that and make them laugh, no other show is going to intimidate me. So, you know, like, if I could get through there and realize, oh, people are people. People are going to laugh. They want to laugh no matter what race, their background, whatever. If you can get anyone to laugh, you're going to be safe. And so that's why, like, it prepared me for stuff like AGT. Because people will ask me, like, oh, was that scary? And I was like, no, man. Compton, when you first start, it's scary, you know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, this is nothing. AGT, that audience is the most supportive audience you will ever be in front of. I'll take that 1,000,000 times over having those.
So, I wondered when I see comedians on AGT, is it harder to do a huge crowd, or is it harder to do a small 20-person, you know, group?
It is 100% harder to do a small group. I have always I have always found that to be the case because you know, AGT is a little bit different animal because those audiences are trained. Like, they don't want you to do poorly. Like, those audiences want you to do well. So they're excited that you're there. But just as a performer,
Okay,
I've always found it so much easier. I can get 500 people in an audience to do what I want a lot easier than I can get 5 people to do what I want, because groupthink is a very real thing. And, you know, if you're in a group of 500, you don't want to be the one person who stands out. If you're in a group of 5, you know, you're not as likely to be influenced by the other people around you. You're going to be your own kind of island in that situation. So I will always take, I mean, big crowds can be a little intimidating just based off the sea of how big they are. I mean, the theater you're in for AGT is, you know, anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people. That's a lot of people, you know. It's not like it's something to scoff at. But I feel it's easier to make them come along with me than it is if it's just me and 3 people in the audience.
So Ryan, I want you to see if you can tell me about your experience with the Comedy Caravan in Louisville.
Oh, the old Caravan. That's a deep cut right there for for an interview like this.
You like that one? You like that one?
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a real soft spot. So the Caravan was the main club, and they're still holding on now. It's had gone through a lot of different owners over the years, even since I started working there. But for me, that club is always going to be very important because they're the first comedy club that actually gave me paid work. Like, you know, booked me for a weekend to actually perform, to be there. They kind of just took a chance on me early when I had first moved back from Los Angeles to the Midwest. And yeah, it's just one of those things. And the club to this day, you know, it's you can definitely tell it was a club from the 80s and 90s. It still kind of has that chic to it. And there's a lot
Nice.
of and a lot of the acts, you know, like the club's loyal, so it's using a lot of acts that they've used probably since the 80s and 90s, who they just have these relationships with. You know, it's not the most modern. I could probably use a fresh coat of paint, but I'll always have a soft spot for it. A lot of the staff has been there for a long, long time. They were there well before I started working there. They'll be there well after I retire, probably. They'll just always be a part of that.
Here's a topic I love to talk about. And I am, you know, when I met my girlfriend, I told her, like, look, I am obsessed with pro wrestling. Completely obsessed. I just have so much crap, and I have the network playing in the background all day long. So at 21, you actually started to train to wrestle, but it was your back that couldn't take the hits. What was your experience with you know, wrestling training?
It was so hard. It's one of those things that, like, I'll get on the soapbox a little bit because, like, to this day, I still love pro wrestling. You know, if anyone watched AGT, you know, that's where the Cripple Threat name came from. That's how I came up with Club Numb.
Exactly.
Like that's like pro wrestling stuff. You know, doing the thing with Jericho was awesome. That was a dream come true, and, like, you know, because that's all real. That's a part of who I am.
Yeah, that's something I want to talk about in just a minute. Yeah.
Sure, we'll do that next. Yeah. But
that's something I want to talk about in a minute. Yeah.
The wrestling training itself. So I had kind of been posting just on a couple of, like, kind of Indiana forums for, like, pro wrestling stuff, and a couple of guys that were independent wrestlers in Southern Indiana, Don Leishan and JJ Heath. They kind of reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, we have a ring. We're trying to start this little training school down here. Do you want to come down and do it?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, let's do this." And that stuff is hard. I had always kind of done a little bit of, like, bumping and stuff like that on my own. Anyone who ever followed wrestling any kind of close, like, you learn to throw yourself around a little bit, you know. But the actual, like, training for it, and I wasn't, like, I'm not a super athlete. You can kind of tell that just by looking at me, probably. But I was in much better shape at 21 than I am at 38 right now. And, like, yeah, it was just so rough on the body doing all those bumps over and over again. And I got to ref a couple shows, which was very cool. I enjoyed that. It is something now, as an older individual, I would love to be involved with wrestling in some way. It would not be as an active competitor. I just don't have that in me anymore. But, you know, over the years, it's been really cool because even when I went back out to, I moved back out to LA after I was gone for a little bit. I trained for a little bit there. I found like a school that was close by, and I got to meet a few guys that I'm still friends with now. Kind of most notably, in the training class I was in was Peter Avalon, who is one of the librarians. Did that for AEW. So I've been really close with him for years. And so like just over the years of doing comedy and stuff, I've kind of got to live vicariously a little bit, because I've got to randomly become friends with, like, I'm good friends with the Young Bucks. I randomly know them. An old friend of mine went to high school with Nick. So he used to come to comedy shows and stuff. I know Scorpio Sky from hanging out with them. One of my best friends in the world I do a podcast with is Johnny LaQuasto. Until recently, he got furloughed because of the pandemic, but he was an announcer for WWE. He was 205 Live's main announcer. So just through all of that, I've got to meet all these kind of like wrestlers in random ways. Obviously the Jericho thing, which we're going to talk about. So for me, I think that's cool enough. That stuff's hard on the body. It's hard enough just to exist as a 38-year-old man anyway. So I don't know if I want to add the bumps, but I love wrestling, man. It's something that's always going to be a part of me. It's just, it's meant so much to me as a person that, like, even right now where it's not the best that you could possibly watch, I'm still, man, I'm loyal. I'm not going anywhere.
No, yeah, you always go back Mondays and Fridays and Wednesdays to watch, and it's something that I probably will not let go of. Before we talk about Jericho, though, can you talk about the parallels between stand-up comedy and, cutting a promo in professional wrestling?
It's not too far off, really. Like even like the whole businesses, comedy and pro wrestling are outside of just what the final product is, they're pretty close. The travel is the same, the grind is the same, just trying to get noticed by the right people, and then when you get your opportunity, taking the biggest advantage of it. But I mean, that's all stand-up and promos are. It's basically just kind of being an extension of yourself, but just a bigger version of it, and making people care. Because, a lot of things that comedians talk about, if you're actually listening, like obviously there's like the big important stuff, if people are talking about social injustice and politics. Things like that are bigger deals, but someone like Gaffigan, like we talked about, he's talking about the minutia of life. He's talking about bacon for 45 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
And that by itself, I love my brother, but if he was up there talking about bacon for 45 minutes, I would have turned it off at minute, 2. I would have already been out of there, So it's being this big version of yourself and making other people care, even if what you're talking about could be just common, normal stuff. And I feel that's a lot of what like a promo is, because, we both love it, but wrestling is silly. For the most part, it's a silly thing. If you want to break it down to like the
as soon as you set somebody to the ropes and they run back, it becomes silly.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as you're punching a guy in the face 8 times and he's not even bruised, like there's a certain like suspension of disbelief you have to do. So, and it's guys in colorful costumes and in their underwear, greased up, yelling at each other. So there's campiness and goofiness to it, but you still like have this ability that if you have an audience, you make these people care, even if what you're talking about is silly. And that's what I think the parallel is. It's like you're making people care about stuff that might not be that important in the grand scheme, but in that exact instance is the most important thing in the world.
What was it about? I looked this up in an interview. What was it about Crush versus Doink that made you fall in love with wrestling?
I have zero idea. You're definitely pulling out the deep cuts here. I think what it was, because like in hindsight, when I've watched that angle, and I'll do the Cliff Notes version of it. Essentially, Doink was an evil clown at this time, and he's torturing Crush, who's this big guy from Hawaii, just a big kind of meathead sort of dude. And the angle that really sold me, I remember just flipping through the channels on a Saturday morning, and it was on WWF Superstars, and Crush, this big giant man, this 300-pound, 6'5", 6'6" guy, is getting stretchered out, because Doink beat him over the head with like a fake arm. He was like pretending to be in a sling and then like took off the arm and like, you know, stretchered him out by beating him with this ceramic arm or whatever it was. And something about my 11-year-old brain, because like I was a smart kid. There wasn't really that long of a time in my life where I thought pro wrestling was like completely on the up and up, you know, where it was all like a legit combat. I kind of knew it was a show, but there was just something about how colorful and over the top and, you know, how serious they were playing it. Like, they had to get an ambulance because the evil clown beat the musclehead Hawaiian guy with a fake arm. And there was just something about it that instantly, that just grabbed me, because I'm like, I knew like it was silly, but it was like the most important thing with how they actually were presenting it. And at that point, I'd watched a little wrestling before that, like just off and on. Like friends would have tapes of something and would watch when we'd have sleepover or whatever. But like that was the moment where I was like, okay, now I'm in. I am all in on this. And it's embarrassing in hindsight. You know, most people have like Hulkamania, or, you know, they have some kind of like major, like, you know, younger kids now might have Cena, you know, something that's like this clear like thing. For me, it was crushing Doink.
That was the watershed moment. That and your WWF magazine with Yokozuna on the cover. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, it was close to the same time, but yeah, just seeing that magazine and taking a chance on buying it when, you know, my mom would give us $5 to go to like the little general store by my grandma's house and just like, hey, buy whatever you want. We don't care, but you only get this much. And grab that magazine and just read it over and over again and just got those magazines, got that, and Pro Wrestling Illustrated every month. I would always buy those. That was kind of my thing, and it just sort of all snowballed. Then once I got the internet, I kind of lost my mind, because that's where I was like, there's so much information here. It's everywhere.
So yeah, when you talk about snowballed, I want to talk about like a full circle shit that went down. So you were in Chicago the night that Chris Jericho debuted, and correct, that crowd reaction is still, you know, referred to as one of the biggest crowd reactions. As soon as Jericho flashes across the Titantron, the place went nuts, and everybody knows Chicago for being a great wrestling crowd. So you go from there to actually having Thanksgiving dinner at Chris Jericho's house. Yeah. Holy crap, I really am here.
Yeah, it's such a strange journey about like how weird life can be and how cool things can work out. And like I won't try to get too deep on it, but just like I had a lot of years where I went through a lot of like pretty hardcore depression and like suicidal thoughts and things like this, like stuff that's like really dark stuff as I was trying to come into my own as a person. And then just kind of like realizing now in hindsight, like I would have missed so much cool stuff had, you know, that took over, because then you couldn't write like a weirder story for like how me and Jericho became buddies, you know? So like you said, I was at that Chicago show, and we grew up so poor. It's not like I got to go to every wrestling show ever. That was, I think, like a late birthday present, because my birthday's in May. That show was in August. And okay, I grew up maybe an hour and a half away from Chicago, so it was kind of a special thing to get to go up there. And I didn't get that ticket because the countdown clock was ending. It was just a kind of perfect storm that happened to be the night where that was happening. And you know, you mentioned the pop of that night. Like, it's still one of the loudest things I've ever heard in my life. And I've been to WrestleMania. I've been to some of the bigger Royal Rumbles, you know, where cool stuff has happened. Like, in this one, that is the pop that's still, like, even talking about it now, like, I can remember the feeling, getting those the little rock goosebumps where he always does that when he comes out, just feeling that. Had to go back and watch the tape later because you couldn't actually hear the promo. That building was so loud. I had no idea what Jericho or The Rock said during that. So that moment there, and again, at the time, I thought it was still going to be as a pro wrestler, but like that was kind of the moment where I was like, I want to be able to make other people feel this. You know, this experience that I'm feeling right now in my body, I one day hope that I can do that for other people. So wrestling didn't work out. I got into comedy. Oh, that's great. Fast forward to AGT. So when you're in the finals, you get to do like a basically a celebrity performance, like some kind of duet. And for the singers, you know, for instance, it's very easy. You just find another singer, they sing with that perfect. You can't really do that with comedians. I can't go up there and like, you know, tell jokes at the same time as Dave Chappelle. Like it just doesn't work, you know? So since I had done all of the branding throughout the season of the Cripple Threat and Club Nub, all this pro wrestling stuff, they kind of asked me, all right, who are like your favorite wrestlers? If you could give us a list, who are the wrestlers that you would like for something like this? And they didn't tell me exactly what was going on, but they just asked for that list. And, you know, and kind of my list is stuff, you know, it's like Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, you know, it's like guys like that. But the number one has always been Jericho because of that moment and just, you know, the body of his work over the years. I think he's brilliant how many times he's reinvented himself. And it's just, you know, it's amazing what he's done. So I told them, I was like, yeah, number one would be Jericho. And I even told them this too. And I was like, yeah, but probably you're not going to be able to get him because, you know, he wrestles for AEW. WWE has a deal with NBC Universal because that's where USA is through. So I was like, probably this isn't going to work. Right. But if I had a choice, I would want to be Jericho. So either they didn't care or they just liked me enough where they made it happen anyway. So they reach out to Chris. And at this time, again, I don't know anything that's happening specifically. I remember it was during one of the, I think it was the other semifinal, the one that I wasn't on. I'm in the hotel with 3 or 4 of the other contestants, and we're watching this other semifinal. And then I'm kind of just like on Twitter because they want you to live tweet during the shows. And suddenly I see like, I'm like, oh, damn, I just got followed by Chris Jericho. That's crazy, you know, like, and like that was super cool. But like, I also didn't think too much of it at that moment because even during the process of AGT, because I did the Cripple Threat stuff, I got followed by a few other wrestlers, which was also very cool. You know, like I'm kind of buddies with Hornswoggle now. Kevin Thorne actually lives in Indianapolis.
Jesus,
so like,
I want to see a show between you guys.
Oh, yeah. So there was just a few guys that kind of popped out of nowhere, you know, like Raven follows me now, and I had a nice little chat with him. Just some cool stuff, you know, like, again, they're not all-time favorites, but when you're a wrestling fan, you know their work, you respect what they've done, you understand where they came from. But I get Jericho to follow me, and I'm like, oh, hell, what the, this is crazy. And then he sends me a DM, and he's like, man, you're doing great, man. He even referenced, like, my lobster dad, which I used as a joke during my audition. So I'm like, oh, he's actually watched the damn clip, which is cool, too.
Oh, I love that joke. Love that joke.
But for me, like, my head hadn't connected that they even asked me about what wrestlers I would like, because I'm just so in this moment. So I'm like, oh, this was really cool. What a cool, fun moment this is. That was awesome. I make it through the semifinals into the finals, and then they tell me, okay, Chris is flying out on this day. We're going to film this thing with you and him. And it just blew my mind because, like, it's such a weird situation. Like, I've been doing comedy long enough that you meet a lot of quote-unquote famous people, and I'm not somebody who... It's cool. Again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm such a cool guy that I don't get, like, affected by that. But... You know, if you meet a big time comedian, in my head I was always like, in theory, I can one day be on his level. So I'm not really like starstruck in that way because we kind of do the same thing, you know. Mm-hmm. But for this, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna meet, you know, someone who influenced me so much to do this. So he flies out and he's taking time out of his day. He was actually supposed to perform with Iron Maiden that night, which was a big dream of his. They were doing this big show in LA. So he actually comes in early so he can film this stuff. So he took extra time out. And Jericho doesn't have to do this. You know, he's established enough where this TV spot doesn't change his life. You know, it's just like, he can take it or leave it as far as his brand goes. So he comes in, we improv almost everything. Like, we got along right away. They had a basic idea for what they wanted us to do, but we basically just, back and forth. The video comes out amazing. Everything looks great. It got a great reaction, both from people at home and like the live audience when they showed it. I'm very happy with it. If that was the end of it, life is cool. I'm like, this was such a cool moment I got to do. Awesome. So fast forward, the show. So AGT ends in September. November, I happen to be working Side Splitters, which is in Tampa. I'm there for Thanksgiving weekend. Okay. So I have a Wednesday, Thursday off, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's the weekend I'm working. I originally was going to go up to Orlando and hang out with my buddy Johnny, who I mentioned, a couple guys there. Just kind of had the day off. Chris texted me, though, and he's like, hey, are you doing anything for Thanksgiving? And I was like, well, I'm just down here working, so I'm probably just going to lay low. And he's like, my wife and I want you to come over. And I'm like, oh.
Nice.
Okay. So it just like such a weird, and again, it's one of those things that like his family was cool. They all just treated me like I was supposed to be there. It wasn't weird. And anyway, it was just like, oh, I'm just hanging out with my buddy. So, like adult me, 38-year-old me is looking at it like, okay, man, this is cool, man. I got this cool new friend. He's an interesting guy. We get along great. We can joke around. I'm glad to have this guy in my life. He's very cool. But 16-year-old me is going like, ah! Like it is so mind-blowing that like I couldn't have fathomed that 20 years ago.
I get to meet a lot of cool people doing what I do. I get to interview a lot of cool people like yourself. To me, for real, to tell you the truth, it's still kind of surreal that we're talking and, we've become Twitter buddies and stuff like that. But to sit there, like, you try not to lose your cool. Like, I remember I interviewed Townsend Coleman. Townsend Coleman played the original Michelangelo. And when I asked him for the interview, he said, yes. He was standing right there in front of me. And I'm like, holy crap. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, you just don't know who you are. To me, like in my childhood, you were that guy. I've interviewed, actors from The Walking Dead and other wrestlers. It was him that I lost my cool with. So now that the pandemic has, started, well, it obviously started, but you were, when we kind of met, you said you were doing shows. So what are the shows like now? Is it a different dynamic with the crowd, and is it just the elephant in the room that you have to address what's going on in your material?
The shows are, it's definitely a different vibe, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad vibe. So it's a weird situation to be in because I'll go ahead and be upfront right now. I won't try to make this too political, but in a perfect world, I wouldn't have to work right now. I would rather get to kind of stay home. We're all getting taken care of just enough to, to keep the lights on, not lose our livelihoods, be able to just make things happen so we can kind of get through this. As a country, we all kind of decided we couldn't get on board with that plan at the same page. So, like, I got to work, So I know there's some people that, like, I haven't got a ton of blowback, but there's some people who are just like, I can't believe you're doing this. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be doing it, but unless you're going to volunteer to pay all my bills, I have nothing to say to you, so I still have things I got to do. So the shows themselves, when you get there, it's a little bit different vibe because some people are still tentative to be out there. It might be their first time they've come out to do anything during all of this. So, they're social distancing. Most places are still at a limited capacity of some sort. So it's not like the place is packed. It's not a Trump rally where everyone's just on top of each other doing their thing. So everyone's spread out enough. But you still have this vibe of, it's still a little weird. Because like I said, for some people, it's the first time they've come out. And the vibe is there's a little nervousness, but also people are just so thankful, I think, to get out of the house for the first time. Or, one of the first times to do something fun, that they're very giving audiences right now. Because I'll be honest, when I'm doing a show right now, it's not the best work I've ever done because I'm rusty. Like if you're not performing every week, you're bound to have a little rust you got to knock off. So the shows are still fun. I'm having a good time, but it's not like this isn't the same crisp hour I was doing back in March before everything shut down. But they're just so happy that you're there that everyone kind of gets on board, and they've been a good time. Again, you have to be wary of people's comfort levels. I mean, I don't want anyone hugging me. If you're going to say hi to me, you better be in a mask. Everyone has their own things, so that's definitely different. But the actual shows themselves, you maybe bring up a couple things. You don't want to ignore the elephant in the room, but people just want to laugh. They want to forget about COVID for an hour. They don't want to hear only about it.
They're listening, and they're deciding they want to try their luck at stand-up. What do you think people don't focus enough on in the stand-up world, and what do you think they focus on too much?
As far as like people starting stand-up?
Yes.
I think one thing people focus on way too much is feeling they have to have a ton of material right away. Everyone thinks like if they start, they should be able to do an hour within a year. And that's not how it works. It takes several years before you're good enough to actually have an hour anyone wants to listen to. I think everybody overthinks a lot of that kind of stuff early on. You think that like the way I have to write all the time. I have to have new stuff. Every open mic I go to, I have to have something brand new. No, you don't. Because what ends up happening is instead of having 5 to 10 minutes that just knock it out of the park because you've practiced it, you've tweaked it, you've made it work, you have an hour of material that's half written that never gets laughs. That doesn't do you any good. People get too just in their head, I think, when they start because they're trying to learn the art of this. So they think like, if I don't really explain this entire scenario, people aren't going to get it. So they'll spend 2 minutes describing a situation when they could actually just be like, well, I was at McDonald's and this happened. Instead, they're talking about like, well, it was 2:30, and you got to understand with this particular McDonald's, sometimes they're a little busy at 2. Like they get too explainy on things. So there's that, and I think the other thing that's really important too is that people get so in their head about like wanting to start. And literally, the way you start is you just start. That seems so simplistic, but people always talk about like, oh, I want to practice, I want to do all this writing, I want to make sure this, that, and I want to go to these shows. Comedy is one of the only art forms where the only way you can get good at it is to actually do it in front of strangers. If you want to learn guitar, you can sit in your room for 10,000 hours watching YouTube videos and taking lessons. You can know you are amazing at guitar before you ever let another human being hear it. You can't do that with jokes. You have to try them in front of actual people. So that's how you start. Right. You just go up there, do it, accept that you're going to suck, and be okay with that, because that's how you get better.
Fair to say. We're coming to the tail end of this interview. Ryan, I want to thank you so much for doing the show. This has been so cool. So I have just a few questions left, and it's kind of like the lightning round. We're just going to shoot off these questions real quick, get some quick answers. Is that cool?
Sure, works for me. Let's do it.
Where was the first place you went to in your 95 Buick LeSabre?
Where was the first place I went to in my 1995 Buick LeSabre? I think it was to Walmart. I believe with that being my first car. I think I had it like in Terre Haute. So I think the first thing, I finally got this car and I was like, I got to get groceries. So I think it was just to the Terre Haute Walmart.
So anticlimactic, man.
I know. I wish there was something cooler than that, but man, I got to eat. And I'm an old trailer park kid, man. You get food at Walmart.
Nice. Nate, who you referred to as your sugar daddy at one point in your life?
Yes. Yeah. Could you repeat that? Sorry, part of that cut out.
No, it's okay. Do you still keep in touch with Nate, who you referred to as your sugar daddy at one point in your life?
I do, actually. Old Nasty Nate, as we called him. Yeah, he was an old roommate in college, and he was, for all intents and purposes, my sugar daddy. When I first started stand-up, he had moved out to L.A. He worked as an engineer for L.A. County, and he had a free room, and he was basically like, hey, as long as you work, you can't just sit around and do nothing, but as long as you're out there trying to make some stuff happen, I won't charge your rent. So a lot of my success I attribute to him letting me get those first 2 or 3 years rent free in California to kind of be able to go to open mics and do all this. So yeah, we talk every now and then. He lives back in Illinois now. So anytime I'm kind of in that way, him and his wife usually come out to shows. And I love old Nate. That reminds me, I should probably text him. I'll text him right after we're done here.
Awesome. You said you're 38. Do you have any big plans for your 40th birthday?
Nah, man. I mean, I'll probably be forced to do something, but birthdays are just one of those things that like I like to lay low. I'm really boring off stage for a lot of like my life. Everyone's like, oh, I bet you have these huge. I mean, you have a theater degree. You're a comedian. You probably do these big crazy things. And I'm like, man, for my birthday, just let me play some video games. Maybe buy me a pizza. Just don't surprise me with anything. We can go out and do something, but don't drag me somewhere where I don't know what it's gonna be. Just that's how I do it, man. Like it's one of those things that like since my job and like that part of my life is kind of like so over the top and strange and kind of crazy with all these people I get to meet and places I get to go. In my kind of off time, man, just give me a Xbox controller and a pizza and let's just lay low.
Awesome. Where can they find you on social
You can find me on all the
media,
social.
Ryan?
You can find me on all the normal places you would expect: the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's at CrippleThreat8. That's the number 8, because clearly there was 7 cripple threats before me, but I've risen to power. I also have a couple of podcasts that are out, if you guys would mind subscribing, listening to. One of them is a video game podcast. It is called Baby Got Backlog. Me and my buddy Rev, who's my best friend from college. Basically, I'm a video game collector. I buy games a lot faster than I can play them. He is forcing me to play one a week, and we talk about it and decide if it's now officially off the backlog or if I'm going to keep playing it. The other podcast I do with a couple of buddies of mine, the aforementioned Johnny LaQuasto and my buddy Brent Terhune, as most people know as the redneck y'all love to hate. He does the MAGA redneck character that you probably seen viral videos of. He's a buddy of mine from Indianapolis. We do a podcast called The Cafeteria. It's basically kind of the old theme of like, you know, sometimes you would only get to see your friends in high school at lunch. And you kind of come to the cafeteria table and you would just talk about the dumbest shit imaginable. That's kind of what we do. So it's just that we each bring a topic each week. We have some fun. So give us a listen on both of those and like, comment, review, all that good stuff if you don't mind.
That's Ryan Niemiller. All the links are in the description. You guys can make sure you follow him. Listen to those podcasts. I'm definitely going to take a listen to those podcasts. This is D for this week on DNC Radio. I want to thank everybody for listening. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. You can follow me at DNC Digital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Everybody, wear your masks, go out and vote, be nice to each other, and have a great night.